Evening, everyone from sunny Scotland. My name's Dave Ferguson. I'm the regional organizer for RPS Scotland. It's nice to see so many of you giving up your time tonight to join us here online, not just from Scotland but all over the UK and from international waters as well. So thank you for giving up your time to join us here. We've also joined by Stephen Whitaker, our RPS Secretary for Scotland, and he'll be taking any questions. So if you have any questions for our guest speaker tonight, please put them in the chat box, and at the end of the presentation Stephen will go through all the questions and ask them of our speaker, and hopefully get the answers you're all looking for. And so without further ado, it's a great pleasure to welcome our guest speaker tonight, John Marr. John is from Manchester in England, but he's now an honorary Scot because in 2002 he decided to come north of the border and set up his business and his life on the Isle of Harris. So it's a great pleasure to welcome him along tonight to give us a talk. I'm not going to go into a big introduction on John because he has a little video he's going to show just at the beginning of the presentation, and then that'll give you a little bit more of background about John and what he's done over his life, and all about his photographic work as well. John's career path has been quite diverse, shall we say, between music, engineering, and photography, but they do all have one thing in common: they're all self-taught. And without further ado, I will hand you over to John to introduce himself and start his presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the so yeah, as Dave just said, I've got a video. It's 11 minutes long. It serves as an intro and a little bit of biography in there, and give you a general flavor of what I get up to photography wise. And when that video is over, I'll go back through some of those images. There's some interesting stories attached to some of those, and then I've added in another bunch of images that are not featured in the video. Similar things, some of them have got little stories, maybe a little bit of technical info, but I won't bore you with too much in-depth stuff in that.
John, I think you went on to mute there just accidentally.
Yes,
yeah.
I'm back. I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, yeah. So hopefully you won't need to give me too many nudges for technical stuff. Hopefully our share of the video will go okay. Give us a shout if it's not working quite right.
We did test this video earlier on, folks. You may want to turn your volume up a little bit because it is a little bit quiet. But then after the video, you can obviously turn the volume back down.
Okay, that should be playing now. My name's John Marr. I was born and brought up in Manchester. Here's a couple of photos of me with mum and dad when I was about 3 years old. When I was 16, just around my 16th birthday, got a second-hand drum kit. I ended up joining a punk rock band called Buzzcocks. After the band split in 1981, I drifted into another one of my interests, which was building and racing high-performance air-cooled Volkswagens. I used to race the red car and the green car that you can see in the pictures here. And in 2002, I moved the business up to the Isle of Harris. And about 2009, I got very seriously into photography, making use of the lack of light pollution up here to produce some of the images which I'm about to show you. And this first selection of photographs were all taken under the light of a full moon, and the exposure times lasting several minutes. This particular one's a little fishing boat that was just stuck on the jetty just down the road from our house. This is an old 1957 Albion truck that used to belong to a Tweed mill in Stornoway that had been abandoned at the side of the road. And this used to be known locally as the Magic Phone Box, because when you put your 10p in the slot, the phone call, you'd never be cut off, it'd just go on for as long as you wanted. This is the road home. I called it that because I was literally on the way home after a long night out shooting under the full moon, and got the idea to just walk along the road shining my torch on the road surface all the way down to that bend in the distance. The next 3 photos were all taken in Ness, which is at the top end of the Isle of Lewis. And here's the little cute Ness post office. This was taken in January 2011, shortly after midnight. One of the many shearlings out on the moor in Ness. There's a variety of constructions, but they're all based on a familiar theme. There's one open space with a stone gable end, so there's a fire in there to keep the place warm. Many of them are in various states of disrepair, but also some are still used to this day. And here's Ness's most famous landmark. That's the Butt of Lewis Lighthouse, famously made of brick, and one of the few lighthouses that isn't painted. And here are 3 night photos where I've not actually added any additional light. I've just let nature take its course with these. And the first is what's known as Northton Temple on the Isle of Harris, and this is just a long exposure. The orange glow over to the right is the street lights in the village of Northton. Here's an unexpected visitor. A decommissioned oil rig washed up on the west side of Lewis in August 2016. So this was a late night trek across the cliff top path to get access to the rig, as the police had closed the roads. Don't get many opportunities to take a picture like this on the islands. This is rush hour in Stornoway, and we're looking at the Anne Lanter Gallery, which is the place where my first main exhibition took place. So more about that in the next section. When I was doing my night photography, occasionally I'd go inside some of the old abandoned houses that I was photographing, usually to light the interior. And this is when I started noticing that some of them had quite a lot of personal possessions and furniture and so on left behind. So I started going back in daylight hours to photograph this, and the next series of images is from Nobody's Home. This photograph gave me the title for the exhibition. I took this back in 2010. It's on the Isle of Lewis. And the thing that drew me to it when I first saw it straight away was it just reminded me of the houses that I used to draw when I was at primary school, with the red door bang in the middle, windows either side, just the symmetry of it and the simplicity. I often saw some very brightly coloured interiors, like this yellow painted V lining in the house on the Bays of Harris, along with a clock that I subsequently learned was quite a popular model from the local hardware shop in Tarbert in the 1970s. This is the mystery of the house with the TV set. Long after I'd taken this photograph, I met a member of the family who informed me that the house never actually had any electricity, so why this vintage TV set was in there, I've no idea. Here I'm looking into one of the upstairs bedrooms of Ensay House, which is the only house on the little island of Ensay in the Sound of Harris. And it was quite a grand house in its day. You can see the bell on the wall there to summon the servants from quarters down below. It's not actually been occupied full time for a long time now. I stumbled across this by accident one night. It was during the Muir burn season, where they set fire to the heather to encourage new growth and so on. And occasionally it gets a little bit out of hand, and just the the reflection in the lock there just made for a photo opportunity that I couldn't resist. The next 5 images were all shot using a large format film camera from the 1960s, and I wanted to get that large 4" by 5" negative to produce incredibly detailed large size prints for the exhibition. And this is the house that I showed you earlier, the one with the TV set inside. And there's a very common sight in a lot of Hebridean homes. It's the classic Rayburn, which was really the focal point of the home, I suppose, because it provided heat. You cooked your food there, and it also provided you with hot water. See these everywhere. This room has just got so much in it. That amazing blue chair, the ornate mirror above the mantelpiece, and then all various ornaments, and there was even a birthday card on the mantelpiece as well. Went back to visit this house in North Uist about 18 months after I'd taken the photograph you see here, with the TV crew from the BBC. But as we approached the house, it was obvious the roof had completely collapsed in, but went up, tried to get in, and could barely push the door open. Everything completely buried underneath timbers and slates and so on. So this possibly could be the last photograph that was ever taken of that room. And yeah, spot the sheep carcass in the corner. I like the blue flaking paint on the door, and the fact that the woody wallpaper is also peeling away to reveal the real wood hiding behind it. And to round things off, here's a look at some more recent work of mine. This is a series of portraits, part of an ongoing project where I'm featuring people who live and work on the island. And in a funny sort of way, I see this as a bit of a carry-on from the abandoned houses, really, because although those pictures don't feature any actual people, I felt that it's very much about the people who used to live there, and then taking that forward, let's feature some of the people who do live and work here today, just paying tribute really to the people who might be an ordinary job, some people might refer to them as that, but in an extraordinary place, and the images hopefully are trying to convey that.
That was perfect, John. Just while you're setting up your next screen, I've just put the link to the video in the chat window if anyone does want to go and look at that video.
Oh, cool.
Again. So I've just put it in there if anyone's interested again. But
yeah, well, you probably guessed maybe the last picture there with the big truck. That's the Screen Machine mobile cinema. which roams around various remote parts of Scotland and comes over to the islands probably once every couple of months or so. And the video that you've just seen was actually put together to be shown on there when they came up with this idea of before the main feature. They had this idea of showcasing some Scottish artists, and they actually going back about it could be 4 or 5 years ago, when they first come up with the idea, I was the first person they chose as a guinea pig, just to see how that went. And apparently it was received very well. And then subsequent trips around the Isles, when they were doing their circuit with the mobile cinema, there were plenty of other people got a chance to be featured as well. And that was a slightly updated version for the Year of Coasts and Waters, which didn't quite go as planned because it got delayed by COVID and what have you. So that's the little story behind that. You probably noticed Billy Connolly in there as well. I snuck him in. That was part of a TV series called Made in Scotland. They had the idea that they would film me doing a photo shoot with him, and they left it to me to come up with some idea of where to photograph him, and I just suggested that little concrete bush shelter that's had that Father Christmas you saw in there has been in that bush shelter for about 6 years now. And I didn't think they'd go for such a stupid idea, but they thought it was great. So, but they did edit it all out of the program before it got broadcast. So yeah, what I'll do now is then I'll just dive into essentially it's a slideshow showing you lots more pictures, many of them that you'll recognize from the video, but a bunch of other stuff as well, and I'll just give you a little bit of a chat through those.
That's great.
So make sure I'm getting the right thing now. Right. Okay. Well, this is one of the first night photography things that I did, using this full moon, and it's probably about a 4-minute exposure. And I've used a red light. I actually walked into the shot with a red gel over the camera, over a flash gun, and gave a pop of flash in the cab of the boat. And obviously, because it's a long exposure, and I was wearing pretty dark clothing, and I wasn't stood still for very long at all in front of the camera. I just don't show up. And this is a technique that I got fairly obsessed with, and was out at every chance when there was a full moon, experimenting with this kind of technique. And the next shot, very similar idea. I actually walked into the back of the truck with it was a torch this time, and I just held a red gel over the torch and basically painted that light onto the interior of the truck. And there's one interesting aspect of photography for me has been that I didn't actually know anything about the history of this truck at the time, but when I was first sharing these on I had a Flickr account, and that's where I was posting my pictures. And somebody from the island contacted me, and I could tell that the truck was used to belong to the Kenneth Mackenzie Tweed Mill. Not sure how long it had been dumped by the roadside there, but this guy sent me a photograph of this is that actual truck arriving on the Isle of Lewis in 1957, when this thing was brand new. And it sat it was well, it was in that field by the side of the road when we first moved up here. So the photo I took was about 2011, so it had been there well over 10, probably 15, maybe 20 years. But there's a group called the Western Isles Transport Preservation Group, got the notion that they would rescue the abandoned truck and take it back and get it restored. So then about less than a year after I took my night photo of it, they came down. I mean, bear in mind, you see this thing being winched off the boat because there was no roll-on, roll-off ferries then. So all vehicles were winched off, as you see there. But the amazing thing is that scroll down here, that when the guys came to rescue it, to take it away for the restoration, it just struck me that whilst they're winching it onto the flatbed, they're remarkably similar looking pitch to the one when it first arrived on the island 55 years earlier. Now, the truck is actually, it's never seen the light of day again, as far as I know. I think it's still in storage somewhere. So whether they actually are going to, get it back on the road and up and running, I have no idea. So this next shot, that was again in the slideshow. This is in a little village called Finns Bay. It's another instance of me taking the photo, sticking it on the internet, and then finding out subsequently a bit of story or history about it. And what it was is when you put a coin in to make a call, the mechanism was knackered in such a way that your phone call never ran out. And the great story I was told is that there's a guy who lives about a mile down the road from me. His sister, who was living in Trinidad and Tobago at the time, she'd come over on holiday, stayed with him for a couple of weeks. And while she was here, she started listening to, I think it was Sorry I Haven't a Clue on Radio 4. And she got hooked on that program. And this is going back to the 90s, before digital broadcasting and so on. So I think the final episode of that series of I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue was going to be broadcast the day after she left to go back to Trinidad and Tobago. So she got this guy, Steve, to record it on a cassette recorder. And when she got home, he went down to this phone box and he put his 10p in the slot and rang her in Trinidad and just pressed play on the cassette recorder, and he sat on a chair outside up for it's like half an hour program, all for the cost of 10p. There's loads of the little local stories like that just add the extra flavor to these for me. That one, that was just like I said in the video, that was just on the way home after a long night out taking pictures, and just wandered down the road. I think it's about 3-minute exposure. I walked down the road shining the torch on the road in front of me. And then I actually, I wasn't sure if that would be enough light. So I walked backwards back to the camera to close the shutter, still shining the torch on the road, making sure that the torch was hidden from view from the camera. So that's hence the white light on the road there. This little post office up in Ness, which is right up the top end of Lewes. Apparently it's I think it's the third most northerly post office, let me get this right, northwesterly post office in the EU, as it was at the time. I'd gone up to Ness. Supposedly, I was on a hunt to take a picture up there. Somebody commissioned me to take something related to Ness for her sister's 40th birthday, and the idea was to get an image and print it up on in a large frame. And that was it become quite a cloudy night, and disappointed to find that when I got up there, all the street lights were on. This is around getting on for midnight. And back then, this is when the street lights were all that sodium vapor, I think they call it. They were very orangey, which sort of ruined all the color in everything. And I'd literally given up. I'd done a U-turn at the top of the road and I was going to head home and call it a day. But I'd got about a mile back south of the post office, and all the street lights just magically they clicked off. So I quickly nipped back and got this picture, which actually wasn't the one that ended up being the birthday present. I've got another one from Ness on that same night. Okay, that's also in Ness. This is they're called in Gaelic. They're called Airids, AIRIDH, or sometimes spelt with a GH. Little huts, basically, that back in the day when people used to go out either looking after the cattle during the summer months, or maybe while they were digging peats. It was like a temporary home for people doing that. And there's loads of these things dotted, particularly up in Ness, dotted around. And I spent a night. I think I started about 10 o'clock this particular night. And as I set up to take
a picture like this, I mean, I've done some lighting internally, and I've also thrown some light on the exterior. You can see that the gable end with the vertical wooden slats, that's actually, you see the shadow cast on the ground there. So that was pretty much in darkness. So I've used my torch to throw some light in there to brighten that up, and then a yellow gel over a torch inside. And so the exposures are around about, I think possibly 5 minutes. And my lighting, the lighting that you see that I've done there probably only took me less than a minute to do. So I've got a bit of time to myself, just looking around as your eyes acclimatized to the darkness. And I would see sort of just over the hill, you could see the top of another shieling. And so as soon as I'd got that shot, I'd pack up and walk off to the next one. And it was gone 3 o'clock in the morning. I was trekking around in this moor, finding all these various little shearlings to photograph. And that's the Butt of Lewes Lighthouse. And this is the one that was actually became the woman's birthday, the 40th birthday present. So somewhere in the world, there's a big print of that hanging on this woman's wall, which she got for her 40th. Supposedly unusual lighthouse in that I'm not sure it's the only one that's brick. It was the first one to be built purely of brick rather than the traditional, the blocks with the white and red stripes. And that's pretty much how that lighthouse looks still today. Yeah, this Norton Temple, I think it's originally 16th century or 15th. It's old anyway. And I actually got commissioned to take this picture. It's a woman who used to work in the post office that no longer exists in Leverborough. There was a young woman in the village getting married, and apparently this was her favourite spot on the island to walk out to. It's about a 35-40 minute walk from the village. So I trekked over there one night to get a picture of this, and took the photo, trekked back, but parked up. I was parked up in the village where you see the orange glow there on the right hand side, and got the picture. I did my processing on it. I got the print made, and then I went into the post office to show it off. And the woman who'd commissioned me to do it, she says, "Oh, it's a lovely picture, but did you get one from the other angle? Because that's her favourite view." And it's like, no, I didn't. But anyway, that became the wedding present. This is August 2016 when this oil rig was being towed to Turkey, and the tug that was towing it actually operated an exploding bolt to release it because they've got into such rough seas that the rig was starting to pull the tug about, and it washed up on Lewes. And I actually got a phone call the following day from a journalist at I think it was the Daily Mail, and they were asking me, because this was quite big news, certainly on the island at the time. I think it probably even made the national news briefly. They were saying, well, is there any chance you could get us some kind of spectacular picture of this oil rig that had washed up? And of course, I'd already been thinking about going up there, and I checked the weather forecast, but which wasn't good. We weren't quite at a full moon, and the weather was it got washed up because of the atrocious weather, and it was pretty bad weather for the best part of a week afterwards as well. So I picked my day, the best day. I'd say it was probably about a week after it got washed up, and the already mentioned in the video, the police had closed the road to it. So sure enough, when we got there, there was a police car at the top of the road with a couple of guys in it. So there was no way I was going to get the easy route down to it. So to drive 3 miles over to the west side, there's a cliff top path that comes across, and that's how I got that viewpoint there. And then when I did contact the journalist, I figured it would be a bit late for them. It'd be old news for them. And sure enough, that was the case. So I just stuck the thing up on, I think I put it up on my Facebook page. And strangely enough, literally within about 2 minutes, I got a response from somebody. It was on the rig. There was a team of, I think there was about 14 guys on the rig, getting the thing ready in preparation for it to be towed off. And yeah, power of the internet, and actually conversing with the people who are on the actual rig are taking that shot of. Yeah, this was well, yeah, this is Atlanta, the main gallery up in Stornoway, where I had my first exhibition of the abandoned house photographs, and they were just after something to use for the social media, and I got this idea that you know, you see those there's lots of photographs of in London where the red double-decker bus is going over Westminster Bridge, and you can see the Houses of Parliament in the background, and you know, it's very typically the streaks of light. I thought I'd try and do something along those lines, but the problem up in Stornoway is even at I think it was about 5:30 in the evening on like a November or December night, so it was going fairly dark, just not enough traffic to get loads and loads of light trails. So I actually had to piece this together from about, I think there's about 7 different images. You get one light trail. See, there's a car there just disappearing off down this street, and then I waited and waited for a big truck to come that had high level lights to get that that streak across there. So anyway, eventually it kind of came together. And then this one, for some reason, I came up with the idea of calling this Nobody's Home. I thought it was quite clever, because nobody is home and it isn't anybody's home. At the moment, house is still standing. This is about 12 years ago, and yeah, that nicked that name and used it for the exhibition, which incidentally is actually going to be doing getting an appearance again down in Dunoon. We're just sorting that out at the moment. I believe that's going to open around the end of July, and I'm actually planning to go down there for the opening and do a little talk and a guide around the images. So yeah, just it's really interesting, because these images of the abandoned houses is probably what I'm best known for, and for some reason it's resonated and it continues to you know, see the light of day every now and then. Yeah, that's just a clock that apparently was a big seller in Akram's hardware store in Tarbert. So, you know, there's a few local people on Harris that will recognize that, probably had exactly the same clock in their house. Oh yeah, the one with the TV set. The little story about this one was that there's BBC Alapa were making a TV program about corrugated tin houses, and so one of the producers contacted me because they knew I'd photographed things like that, and asked about maybe taking them to one of the houses and then film me taking pictures of it and so on. And I thought, well, we'll go down to this one. Now, prior to them calling, I got a phone call from somebody. They said they'd been walking through Tarbert one day and they'd seen this old television set dumped on the pavement outside the Harris Hotel, and they figured it's the sort of thing I might be interested in. So of course, you know, I was nosy enough to go and take a look, and I went along, and there was this old 50s, 60s style TV just dumped on the pavement. And I thought, well, it's I don't know, it's just left out for the junk or whatever. I'll put it in the back of the van. I have no idea what I'll do with it. I put it back in the van, took it down to my workshop, and then it was, I hadn't realized at the time, but then I started thinking, surely it couldn't be the one out of that little house in Scalpy that I photographed. So I went back through my photos, and you know, zooming in, I could tell, yeah, it is that TV set. So why it ended up on a pavement outside the Harris Hotel, I don't know. But it must have been at least a year later when the TV people contacted me. And then I got this idea that, well, if you want me to go along and we do something at the little house in Scalpy, I've actually got the TV set, and it'll be an opportunity to reunite it back where I felt it belonged. And so that's what we did. And then a few weeks later, I bumped into a guy on what at the time was our local kind of like local works canteen, a thing called the Butty Bus, which is an ex catering. It's like a little coach that was turned into a catering unit for TV and film sets, but it's ended up as a cafe type takeaway just across the road from my workshop. So I'm one of the regulars there. And I got introduced one day to a guy who was he was the nephew of the woman who used to live in this house. And I sort of said to him, well, we were up doing, did you see the TV thing about the house? And it was on TV, and we had this old television set that we brought back. I took it back. And he just kind of looked at me strangely and says, no, he hadn't seen the program. It's the first he'd heard of it. But after I told him the story, he just said, oh, it's really weird, because his auntie, she never actually had any electricity. So it's, I kind of invented this whole myth about the imagining people watching this TV and, me being great and everything, bringing it back to the house. And it sounds like it never ever belonged there in the first place. So, unsolved mystery. Oh yeah, this uninhabited island, which is about a mile off the south end of Harris. And I got an opportunity, well, somebody offered to take me over there one day. We had about 3 or 4 hours on the island and got access to the house. And it's a Victorian, I believe, or sort of late 1800s. And it's pretty grand thing. The bell, I called it a bell on the wall. It's actually a bell pull. There's ropes that go through to the servants' quarters to ring the bell. And what caught my eye with this is kind of, the idea of looking into the room, but also looking out of it to what is actually a tiny little chapel. And there's a little group of people on they've called themselves the Friends of Ensay. And what they do is they organize a trip once a year across to the island with a minister of some description to hold a little service in that chapel you can see through the window. And it's some kind of requirement to keep it officially recognized as a religious place. And that, I called that photo Bedroom and Chapel, because that's what it is. And that's proven to be probably one of my most popular images. It's just a case of happening to, being fortunate enough to get access to the house and get it on a good day. And then, this is I don't know if you're familiar with the Muirburn thing. It's when early part of the year when crofters are permitted to light off certain parts of their crofts to encourage new growth, and it sometimes gets a bit out of hand. This wasn't really a danger to anyone, but I'd gone out to photograph not that actual house, one nearby, but of course with the fire blazing away, it did look pretty spectacular. So just a case of trying to capture that with the camera. Now, this was obviously a former house, just left with the 2 gable ends left standing. And this was around 6 o'clock in the evening in getting into the summer months. So it wasn't particularly dark. But as my fascination with lighting developed with the night photography stuff, I started exploring ways of not trying to do exactly the same thing during daylight hours, but a way of using light to enhance the image. And while I was setting up to take this photograph, I just came up with the idea that I'd try and do it from the viewpoint of imagine that it was still an occupied house and the lights were on inside. And so that was the approach I took. I tried to mentally, light everything so that it looked to the viewer as if, it is being lit from inside. So it's a technique that I use quite a lot. It's composite of approximately, I would say, about 6 or 7 different exposures, with the light being pointed at different angles. And it coincided that trip. It's on the island of Battersea, which is now connected by a very short causeway to the Isle of Barra. And the day that I took this picture, I was actually on a job photographing various buildings around the island, and one of the buildings I shot was the big church in Castle Bay in Barra, and I'd gone into the church, and the Catholic newspaper, the latest edition, on the front page was a photograph of a hearse on the Barra, you know, I don't know if you know, probably many of you are familiar with it, that Barra Airport, it's the only place where planes land on a beach. It's an incredibly spectacular looking airport. But this was shortly after the Manchester Arena bombing, and unfortunately, one of the victims was a young girl. I think she was 15. She lived in Barra, and she was killed in the bombing. And the photograph on the front of the newspaper was her coffin being brought back to the island, and you know, being loaded into a hearse on the beach. Just well, basically, very moving picture. And yeah, I always associate this photograph because this was taken a few hours after I'd seen that in the church, and it's, yeah, it sounds a bit corny, but you know, it's making this attempt to put the lights back on or something. I don't know, it just has those kind of vibes for me. So that's always a personal favorite for me, that picture. And actually, having come back from Barra and got that picture, I was sort of tinkering with the idea. I've taken lots of night photos where I've gone in and lit interiors, but the idea of putting the lights back on in these empty houses kind of sounded like a good idea. So that's again, just went out, and that's what I was trying to do. I again just wandered into the shop, wandered into the house with my torch, LED torch, a yellow gel just held over it, and literally just painting the light around in the house. Stuff like that can sometimes take a few goes. You might blow out highlights because you've shone the light on the wall for far too long. So I think it was probably second or third attempt that I got that, and it just kind of struck lucky as well with the wind direction, in that during the length of the exposure we've got that nice cloud movement going on as well. And the bit of a giveaway on the length of the exposure, you can see there, well, I don't know, hopefully they're showing up on your screens, you know, the little star trails you can see there as well. Okay, this probably noticed I do like photographing red phone boxes for some reason. I just found there's something neat about them. Yeah, this is it's on Harris. It's the old Scarrister post office. I don't think it was actually in use at the time I took this, but the phone box was still working, and the light is it's not. I've not added the light to the phone box. That's just the light that's in there. The only light I added to the shot is a little sort of splash of light across the front of the post office itself to show off the sign. And yeah, a little bit of a Christmassy cardy type of feeling to that one. And then, yeah, talking about lights, again, daylight shot, and this fits in with this little project I was doing, which is still ongoing. Actually, I've not got one in a while, but I do intend carrying on with this of getting pictures who live and work on the island, and it's mainly because I see an awful lot of photographs of Harris, very much associated with the tweed industry and crofting, and you know, you just get a feeling it gets a little bit cliched, and I'm maybe just being a bit perverse, maybe a bit of that punk rock type thing. Let's photograph people who just do normal jobs, the first, he wasn't my first victim, but he was one of the early ones. This guy called Ian, and I thought, I know him, so I thought he'll be up for it. So when I saw the bin wagon coming down that Thursday, I just asked, "Do you fancy me getting a shot of you over there by the jetty?" And he said, yeah, and it was him who grabbed the wheelie bin and slung it there, so he was totally up for this. But the thing is, I've again, you could probably tell I've used quite a lot of light in this shot. Particularly, I got a shot of him. I lit him with a big softbox to get that nice quality of light on him. And then I said, right, you're okay, you can step out of the shop now. And then I set about lighting the front of the truck, the side of the truck, the signs there around him. I think I got them to put the lights on the truck as well. So it's my way. I've seen these high budget photo shoots where a photographer will have a crew of maybe a dozen people, and they might be all holding lights, and one's got a smoke machine, and this is my totally budget way of trying to achieve that. But I did all the lighting. I obviously can't be in 8 places at once, but I can, with the magic of, you know, layering these images up in Photoshop and then piecing in the bits of each of those images that I want to create that multi-light effect. And these two here, this Roddy the driver, although Jessica's in the driving seat there, Mobile Bank comes down every Tuesday. And I asked them if they were okay for being in the shot, and they agreed. And that Jessica there leaning out the window, that's actually I had a check to pay in that day, and that's my paying in book that she's got. And again, same idea as the bin man picture. Numerous exposures taken with the flash being fired at different angles onto the picture. Again, as another one, this is a little gift shop over in Berneray, and that's Ailey that owns that. It was built by her dad. Multiple lighting, again, all over the different angles and pieced together later in Photoshop. This is in Leverborough. Joan, the hairdresser. I lit inside the building. Obviously on Joan as well. I actually suggested to her that maybe she might want to move the car, but funny little story about that. She said, "Oh, I'd rather leave it there," because that sort of, you know, this plasterwork, that peachy coloured, beigey plasterwork, you see it all over there. What had happened is a customer had been in to see her, I think a couple of weeks before, and he reversed his van into the position where her car is. He's got a tow ball on the back of his car, and it drove into the wall and cracked, and a load of that plaster stuff fell off. And she was actually a bit embarrassed about that, and so that's why she started always parking the car in that spot, basically to hide it. So I thought, right, well, nobody else probably knows a story about that, but you do now. And then, yeah, that's the one I mentioned earlier. Plonked Billy Connolly on a chair outside the bus stop there with Santa. Santa, sadly, in the last few months, he's disappeared. Bit weird. I don't know where he's gone, but he has literally been in that bus stop for years and years and years. And it was cool that they agreed to go with that. I think same thing, a lot of lighting. It was a very bright day, so it was difficult to overpower the sunlight on that one, but just about managed it. I'm whizzing along here now because I'm conscious of time. Edwin Collins, surely some of you will know who he is. It was nice to be asked to call over and see them in Helmsdale. He was recording a new album and decided they wanted me to do a photograph for the front cover. And we basically spent half a day driving all around Helmsdale, Brora, looking for the ideal location. And it was one of those things where I kept thinking, you know, it's not really working, this. And then ultimately we went back. This is his, that's his studio, by the way, recording studio. And he was walking down to go back to the studio, and I just thought the light looked great. And I said, Edwin, go and take off your duffel coat. That probably, if you know him, you've often seen in a duffel coat. Go and get a proper coat on. We'll get a shot of you there. And as soon as he saw that on the back of the camera, said, that's it. That's the one. Because I was all set for saying, you fancy having another try in the morning? But no, that's the one. And he went with it, and it came out well. And then on the back of that album, he opted to use, this is a picture of the studio, that gap in the middle there, that's where he was standing when I took the front cover photo. So yeah, nice one to have in the collection. And there the Screen Machine that was touring around showing the video that I showed you at the beginning. I'm just going to quickly, I think I've got a few more here. I would like to touch on a few film shots. That's before I get to that. A Trabant, which this was a real surprise to me. I was just sort of aimlessly driving around an area up the top end of Lewes, which is called Point. And this is in a village called Fleshering. And I just turned around a corner and there's a Trabant dumped in just dumped there. So it's a daylight shot, underexposed it a bit, and put some light on to give it a bit more dimension to the photo. And obviously I'm attracted to these bits of junk in the landscape, and I suppose what I'm doing is I'm treating the beautiful landscape of Harris as a backdrop and then making some man-made object, usually in a poor state of condition, as the subject. Yeah, I was going to touch on some of the photos in that Nobody's Home exhibition I shot on large format film. And the reason that came about was that when first got the offer to do the exhibition, I've seen many exhibitions in Atlanta, and there was one in particular by a guy called Murdo MacLeod, who's a great photographer, does a lot of work for The Guardian and The Observer, quite a distinctive style. And he had an exhibition on there. And well, practically all the prints he'd got on display were really big, very, very impactful. And that struck me. And I thought, well, if we're doing an exhibition, I've got to have at least some very large to try and get that impact, because the digital camera I was using at the time wasn't capable of producing really large prints, not unless they were going to be very pixelated and poor quality as a result. And it just so happened that I saw a documentary on Sky Arts about a photographer called Michael Eastman, who had done a project. I think it was called Vanishing America, and it was right up my street. It was similar stuff. It was decaying abandoned buildings, but what he was doing, he was shooting it on an 8x10 film camera. And then the interesting bit was that when he had the negative developed, he was getting those scanned at very high resolution and basically turning that 8x10 negative into the equivalent of a big digital sensor. So he now had a digital image to work with, which was absolutely huge. And from that was able to produce incredible quality large prints. So anyway, that got me thinking. I looked into this. 8x10 was a bit out of my league, but I did buy a 4x5 camera off eBay, and I got that for 210 quid with a lens. I bought another couple of lenses and set about learning how to shoot large format film and having to learn the zone system, and went down a whole different rabbit hole, but absolutely loved every minute of learning it. And it is something that I will go back to. I've got plans to use large format again for something. And the real eye opener was the quality of the print and the size. That I'll just skip to the next one. That's the house that the TV set was in. I shot that on 4" by 5" negative. I actually had the prints made up to 5 feet by 4 feet. So that's what's, I don't know what that is in metric. So judging by the people I was seeing showing up there watching this, I think some of you will be old enough to know what 5 foot by 4 foot is. But then we're getting the imperial measures back now, so everybody will know soon. Again, another eye-opener for me was this particular image. I knew when I was setting up to take this that the area on the right-hand side, just by the window, that's going to blow out, because I'd calculated with my spot meter that to get detail in the shadow areas that I wanted, the dynamic range was going to go way out on the window. I thought, well, I'll have to accept that. It's out looking out a window, so people kind of accept it's potentially a blowout there. And so when I got the negative developed, I scanned. What my routine was to scan them myself. I've got a little flatbed, well, a V700 Epson flatbed scanner. just to as a means of checking, are they good enough to send out to somebody to scan at high resolution on a drum scanner. And this was one image I really liked, but on my scan, it was definitely blown out in that white area on the window. And now, when I got the drum scan version back, the amazing thing to me was that all that detail, it was in the negative, and that drum scan was able to get that detail out. And I'd lost that whole complete blown out area. And it just goes to show that, you know, as good as digital cameras are, you know, this was a Kodak Ektar 100 film, if you're into all that. The quality that can be captured within that negative is absolutely astounding. So for something, if I want to do big prints again, I'll definitely be going back to the 4x5 camera. This is, another one that was in the exhibition. I called this a green room. What I actually did with this, using the movements on the camera, I actually used 2 sheets of film. I moved the back of the camera, maximum shift to the left, and then I took an exposure, and then I loaded up another sheet of film, maximum shift to the right, and so that's 2 shots pieced together to get that area. And the final print on that was well, I've still got this. It's 79 inches wide by 4 foot tall. And there's no way you can see it on the screen here now, but there's going from the door handle across to the arm of the sofa there at the back wall. There's a spider's web, and there was a dead spider in that. And on the print, you can see the spider quite clearly. Just the quality, the content of information that's been captured within those negatives was absolutely astounding. So happy to answer any more questions on that if there's any tech stuff. I'll just finish off with these 2. Again, shot on 5x4 film. I've not added any lighting to this. This is just, you know, click. I called this picture The Dog, the Cat and the Bird because of the picture on the mantelpiece there of the dog. There's the cat. And I did notice when I was taking the picture, I was setting up to do it, at the foot of my tripod, there was the skeleton of a little bird, but it wasn't in the shot. So I gave it a little flick with my foot. And again, it's a real shame we can't see this at a larger size, but you have to take my word for it. That's the little dead bird there. And a little while after I took this picture, this is a house that had been empty for years. A guy that I kind of, I knew him as a fisherman down in Leverburgh, came to see me, and he said he bought the house and they were going to renovate it. And this is actually one of the few houses that the abandoned houses I photographed that have been renovated. And he said, before we strip the whole thing out, it might be a good idea to get a picture of him and his wife, and then at the time 3-year-old child Matilda in there. And then the goal was to, when the house has been all renovated, is to do like the modern day version. So we did. There's young Matilda sat on the top of that blue Rayburn stove, still got the dog and the cat pictures up on the mantelpiece. And I think she recently had her 9th birthday party. I've not been back in yet to get a photograph of them all in the new house, but that will happen. Now I've got a few other film pictures there, but I think, unless someone's going to tell me otherwise, I know I've done my hour now. So is that enough for everybody?
John, that's perfect. Yeah, no, that's great. I don't know if you want to stop screen sharing, and I'll ask Steve to do any questions that you've got for you.
Yeah, fine.
That was perfect. Really looking forward to seeing the rest of your project, especially with the people working in Harris. Like you say, I just imagine Harris being sort of tweed and all these sort of beautiful landscapes, and your punk side is definitely coming out in your images. I'm surprised I didn't see any sort of Northern Light images. Is that something that you've ever sort of taken, or you must see them quite often up in Harris when you're out at that time?
You know, I have seen them quite a few times, but I've only once ever seen what I would call like a proper spectacular show. I don't know why, but they don't. It's probably because the number of times, you know, we've had a phone call and somebody will say, "Have you seen the Northern Lights?" And you nip outside and you look at it and you think, "That's just like that green wash again." You know, can't be bothered. You just go back in. So that sounds terrible because I know some people are absolutely obsessed with seeing them. But I will admit that the one time where it was genuinely swirling around purples and greens, that did look spectacular. But it's rare that you get it that strong.
And not something you're really interested in photographing, then you're more interested in your...
I think I wind my wife up by saying I hate natural phenomena.
I'll hand over to Steve to see if he's got any other questions from members.
Well, actually, the first question is the Butty Box, it's closed down now, isn't it?
No,
or it's not reopened.
The Butty Bus.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's actually away this week. But yes, it did. It reopened. The great thing with it used to be pre-pandemic is you used to be able to actually go in and sit on there, and you'd get some of the local guys that come in, and of course you get some of the tourists that come in, and you'd have to get chatting and that. And just sometimes it was so funny on there. But it was also like my main point of picking up all the local gossip, because that's where it would all get exchanged. But pandemic came in when he reopened. He's basically, it's like at the doorway now, instead of being able to go on board, is a hatch, and you order, and he gives you one of those little things that will bleep you when it's ready. So it's slightly lost some of the social aspect of it. But no, Chris is still going strong with the Butty Bus. It's just he's away this week.
Okay, because I'd been there before, and the last time I was there, it was shut, and that was obviously during COVID times. And I thought,
yeah,
when he reopened, so he has reopened again.
Oh yes, yeah. He was like a lot of places. The lockdown thing's weird now because you forget how long it dragged on. But yeah, certainly through the heavy duty lockdown phase, it was closed. Yeah, until he figured out a way of doing it.
So we've had one interesting question from Andrew, who he's obviously thinking about your punk influences in the past. Do you get spooked when you get into the old houses, or do you spook the old houses back?
It's happened to me once. It's kind of weird because you're in there at night, and there was one where it did happen where it was the first time I'd actually ventured inside at night, because normally I was out and about in the landscape outdoors, but this house looked so interesting. I thought, I'm going to actually wander in here, and I was setting up to do a long exposure thing, and I heard a noise outside the window. And you logically you think it will have been a sheep. I'm sure it was a sheep, but if you let your I found my imagination. You know, you go all what was, I can't remember the name of that film now. You know, where they went camping, and if you let your mind go down there, it's like pack the gear up, and like, or even I even thought I'll just leave it. It'll be fine. I'll come back for it in daylight. But that was the only time really that I did get spooked. Yeah.
The Blair Witch Project one.
That's the one. That's it. Yeah,
that's the one. So that was the John Marr project.
Oh yeah. Mate, I laugh about it now, but it was pretty weird at the time.
At the time, yeah, especially if you're in the middle of nowhere on the island, because it's a spooky wee place at times, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the night I meant, you know, when I was talking about the Sheelings up in Ness, and I found myself wandering around there for hours one night. Well, it actually got to a point where I started wondering where did I leave my van. But unfortunately, I did make a mental note, because you could see the lighthouse from miles away. Obviously, that's the idea. And I sort of took my bearings off of that, so I knew how to get back. But when I was still about probably a couple of miles away from my van, I was walking across this peat bog, and I literally sank in it to just up above my knees. So I just felt I had the sense to fall backwards. I mean, it wasn't like quicksand or anything like that, but you just thought, I've got no reception on my phone. I'm out here nobody, when if something did happen to you, it's pretty could be there for some time. Yeah,
it'd be.
But then that's part of the fun.
Alan was asking, do you still do all the other stuff? Do you still do music? Do you still do the engines? Do you still do all the other things as well?
Yeah, still do the engines. I was working on putting one together today. Music wise, I still play. I've got an electronic drum kit right behind me in this room here. It's kind of like I suppose this was my, if people had lockdown projects, this was mine. It's a kind of like a little recording studio just for it's self-indulgent messing around with. Got a couple of guitars, I've got the drum kit and that. So yes, I'm still dabbling, but I'm not actually playing live with a band or anything like that. But who knows what might crop up.
Are we likely to hear John Mardy lockdown tapes then, or anything like that shortly?
I don't. You never know. You never know. I've got various things. Yeah, it's a weird thing. I've got lots of little sorts of semi ideas recorded that have never been really properly knocked into shape. I keep meaning to go back. I'm a bit of a procrastinator with that music side. I'm not used to that stuff yet. But
Edwin's studio up in Helmsdale. They could put it back together for you all, because that's quite a setup he's got up there, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. That is a fantastic setup in a great location. Yeah. In fact, we are going to go over. We're over that side of Scotland in September, I think, and we've already been in touch with Grace and Edwin and said, we'll have to drop in and see you again, because we got on with them really, really well. They're great people.
He's done remarkably well since his brain hemorrhage, hasn't he? Really.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, it was. But actually, before they contacted me to do, that album cover that I showed the pictures of, it was a little bit before, probably, I don't know, 6 months before that. I'd seen that film. The film that charted that whole thing of his stroke and everything. And I knew he had some issues and that, but I didn't realise how serious the whole thing was. And then, of course, Grace and Edwin himself, we got to hear even a little bit more about it that time I was over doing the photo. So, yeah, the boys done good.
They brought the film to the DCA in Dundee and went to see it, and they came along and they did a wee gig in front of the cinema. They just started playing and singing along, and you think, God, he could hardly speak, but he could still sing.
Yeah. And he's such a, I mean, in the rock and roll business, there's a lot of strange people, should I say, but Edwin is like, he's one of the genuine good guys. Yeah. So it was great to do that photo project with him.
The large format stuff, so a question about that. So is that going to be more interiors, more old houses with the large format stuff?
No, well, just before lockdown hit, first time round, my idea was I was very inspired by a book of photographs by an American photographer called Stephen Shaw. I'm sure a number of people will know him. And in the 70s, he did a thing where he basically drove around America with a large format camera and took just basically pictures of America. And it's one of the thing that I really like about it is that it's obviously a fantastic eye for a shot and the technical side of it, but the content of the images, there's just like people waiting to cross a street and there's cars stopped at the traffic lights, and it instantly it's a dated shot because those cars are of that era. The people are wearing those clothes that Americans wore back then, and it just occurred to me that I've got some stuff, not unintentionally, I've over the years got some stuff like that, but it struck me that maybe I should look at actually consciously going out to try and capture something like that. And I thought that the large format camera suited it. So I'd be out looking around for things that kind of thinking ahead that will date the picture. A bit difficult to do maybe in this place because there's lots of stretches where it's just a road going way off into the distance. But it certainly got my my brain cells going, and I think it's really suited to the large format thing.
You were going around because you turned up in Arbroath and took a photograph of Pleasureland. So was that part of that kind of thinking? Was that thinking, looking ahead, looking for places that you could get that would be part of that project?
No, it wasn't actually. That was just a brief week holiday away. I think we were down in staying for a week in St. Cyrus, would it be? Mm-hmm. That's over that neck of the woods. So yeah, I mean, just day out in Arbroath, and you rock up to Pleasureland, and it's got that absolutely fantastic sign. I mean, it looks like something out of the American Midwest.
It does,
you know. Yeah. And I got, as somebody said, you must have photoshopped it because there's always loads of cars parked down the side of the building there, and there wasn't. There was one car which I actually it crept into the shot, but I cropped that out of the final image that I ended up displaying. In fact, I've got a big a 30-inch by 20-inch print of that hanging on our kitchen wall because we liked it so much. But it's just the. It's the optimism of that word, Pleasureland, set against just this kind of bleak concrete wall with the bright orange and yellow letters. I mean, how could you not take a picture of that?
And on the inside, it's full of tacky fun and cheap hamburgers and smells of onions and it's also, it joins onto Arbroath Football Ground. So it shares a wall with Gayfield, the Arbroath Football Ground.
Yeah, well, I didn't know any of that until I got the picture. I didn't go inside, and I think it might have been shot actually, because it was it was some form of lockdown period that I got that picture. But I did look it up, and then I thought, well, often with these things, I suppose it's a bit like listening to words of a song and not really knowing what the song's about. So you make up your own meaning. So I've got my own vision now of what Pleasureland means to me, and it sort of reminds me of when we first started coming up to Scotland and to come and visit the Hebrides. We always drove past this. I can't remember exactly where it was, but there was this big brown sign, and it was left turn off to Highland Mystery World. And I thought, well, one day I'm going to have to go to Highland Mystery World. And of course, it's the sort of thing probably would never get around to doing. But then eventually, come up one time, and it's like, that sign's not there anymore. And then I found out, well, Highland Mystery World has closed down. So then I think, actually, whatever I've got in my head that Highland Mystery World consisted of is probably loads better than the realities.
Yeah, I don't think it was particularly wonderful or mysterious. I think it probably just as well you missed it.
I know, but I love the way they big it up. You know, it could only ever be a disappointment. You know, and I never went through that disappointment.
Have you been to the giant Macaulay Museum in Dunvegan and Skye?
No, sadly, no. It's weird with Skye, because usually if I'm going through Skye, it's because I'm on my way typically down to Manchester, and if I'm coming back, I've got to make the ferry. So if I've got a bit of time, I only ever stop off in Portree. I've never really gone investigating.
Well, the giant Macaulay Museum's a bit like that. If you and go quickly, it might not be there forever.
Right. Okay.
Have we got any more questions?
That's all the questions. That's all the questions. In fact, it's been good.
No, right. It's been great. No, John, thanks very much for taking your time out and speaking to us tonight. And hopefully, once you finish your other projects, you would do us a pleasure in coming back and speaking to us again. I'm sure Steve will.
Yeah, but I'd have to do it. I'd have to absolutely make sure I got my slideshow thing sorted out, because that really annoys me that I didn't get that. So I hope I didn't spoil it too much.
No, it was fantastic. We could still see the images perfectly well, and it was fantastic tonight. And thank you once again for joining us. And to everyone else who's joined us tonight as well, thank you for giving up your time and coming along. We'll hope you've enjoyed our talk. that's the last of our talks just now. We will have new talks coming up very soon. Our actual next event is a face-to-face advisory day at the Bridge of Ilan Church Hall, a week on Sunday. A week on Saturday. So hopefully, if you're about and you want to come along, and you can get onto the website and it's working perfectly well for you, and you wish to book as an observer, then please come along. We'd love to see you there. But in the meantime, I'll just say good night to you all, and thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you, everybody, for coming along.